Over. One. Try to load it 12 times. Load. Open. 10. Single person. Air person. One. Done. 10. Cast it out. Start curtain. Draw rim. Rim curtain. Turn rim. Over. Up. Ready. Aim. Right oblique. Fire.
Whoa.
Over. Fire. Order. Fire. Rest. Everybody get a whiff of that? Nice. Right home with that. Well, welcome to Fort Christmas. Nice turnout today, even with the little clouds we've got. Rain's holding off for us, I hope. You happen to be here. Hey, you happen to be here on one of the 2 weekends we come out. I've been doing it about 30 years now. Come out here to Fort Christmas and talk about the Second Seminole War and the men who fought it and why it was fought. How many of y'all know anything about the Second Seminole War? Well, you may have heard of it in school, right? There's a lot. There's a lot to know. Our brains are full of it. We'll pass a little bit on to you. Now, Second Seminole War was part of the Trail of Tears. You've all heard of the Trail of Tears, right? Well, that Trail of Tears was the removal from the eastern states out to the Indian Territory of what they called the 5 civilized tribes. They were the main ones left that hadn't been conquered. The Creeks, the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and the Seminoles. Now, the Seminoles were down here in Florida. This was a wild, unexplored territory. The rest of the Indians up there were surrounded by the white people. And the Creeks put up kind of a little fight, but they really had no chance and they knew it. So they got on the steamboats, took the trip out there to the new Indian Territory. The Seminoles down here refused to go. They decided they were going to fight for the land. They had signed a treaty that said they could stay here for 20 years. They said, we'll talk about it after 20 years. Florida became a territory in 1821. This is 1835. Told the Indians, go over there, get on the steamboats in Tampa Bay, or we're going to force you to. Well, they sent reinforcements from Fort Brooke on Tampa Bay up to the Indian Agency, who was up by the Silver Springs, Fort King. 108 men under command of Major Dade. Anybody hear of Major Dade's battle or massacre? 108 men, all but 3 of them were killed by the Seminoles. Dade County's named after him. Dade City's named after him. Y'all never heard of him, right? That just shows you what fighting Indians and the glory of fighting Indians and how nasty it was. It was very unpopular. And if you died doing it, you didn't get much attention. The one thing that overshadowed it, Major Dade, December the 28th, 1835, died right over here where Bushnell is today, out there in a place these people had made the Republic of Texas. And a fella in March of 1836, a Santa Anna surrounded a bunch of them and killed them all. Y'all heard of that one, didn't you? Little mission, Alamo? Okay. 138 men or whatever it was. Yeah, you heard about that. That was fighting somebody besides Indians. So poor Major Dave, nobody hears about it. Well, the Seminoles declared total warfare. They started attacking the 16 plantations south of St. Augustine. After they attacked Smyrna, New Smyrna, they attacked down by Key Biscayne. They killed men, women, children, and babes in arms. It didn't matter to them. It was nasty Indian warfare. They were fighting for their lives and fighting to stay here. They needed troops. Needed troops to be sent down here to Florida to fight the Seminoles. Now we're dressed as United States regular artillery soldiers. There were 5,000 of them in the beginning of the war. And they were charged with guarding the frontier out west of the Mississippi. The Indians were going out there. People were trying to squat on their lands already. They had wild Indians, Cherokee and Osage and Comanches were out west. They had to protect them from them. So the infantry was pretty much out there, half the forces. Now we had a lot of forts all the way from Maine to New Orleans that were built after the last British War, 1812 to 1814. So they started gathering those troops up. Now, the way you can tell the difference between an artilleryman and an infantryman is on the fatigue uniform. See, it's yellow or gold rather than white. The buttons are made out of brass instead of pewter. You got a little eagle on there with an A or an I, but you can't see that, but you can tell an infantryman from way off because of the color of his trim. So they gathered them all up, sent them down here. But before the regulars could get here, the militia was called out. Now, y'all probably, if you probably don't know anything about the militia system either, do you? Now, it's the interesting part of our history because these people, their grandfathers, had fought off the king. It's 80 years that we've had of freedom. And a large army can be brought against the people. And also it creates a large government to pay for it, and we were trying to keep the government small. So every man was the army. Every man of sound mind, able-bodied, white, free, or between the age of 21 and 45 was subject to be called up to fight. So Florida had a militia. The militia companies went out, but they were outnumbered and outmanned. They were paid $10 a month. They were paid $12 a month, signed up for 30 days. Now, this fellow over here, he's a Florida militiaman. He came out with what he had. And you can tell he hadn't got a lot. The Indians were better armed and better equipped for war than the Floridians were because they were farmers. They were plantation owners. They were teamsters or whatever. They weren't soldiers, and they didn't have a lot. So they came out, they had a run-in with the Indians several places. Dummett Plantation up there where Port Orange is, Spring Garden Plantation where DeLeon Springs is, and several other places. Well, they got whooped. They ended up going on back to St. Augustine, taking refuge in Fort Brooke or bigger places to hide from the Indians. Well, finally, the United States troops get down here. Now, being a soldier was not a very honorable profession in those days. The officers were generally educated men, and they would leave the army and make a lot more money somewhere else. Just a regular laborer had no problem finding a job. He would stay on a farm. He had a roof over his head, he would have food, and he would get paid, and a lot more than a soldier. But soldiers, a lot of them were foreigners, or they were people that were down on their luck, and they joined the army. At the time, you joined up for 5 years, your pay was $5 a month. But, this really costs. Something that they were given was a suit of clothes. A suit of clothes in those days, we don't think about it, but that was expensive item. You may have one suit of clothes, and you wore it all the time until it wore out. You're given a suit of clothes twice a year. This is the fatigue jacket. This is your everyday sports workwear. Now out in camp, we've got a dress uniform, dress coat, nice tails, dark blue, expensive wool, red, which was very expensive, and the gold trim, a shako, like a top hat with a brim, looks like and a plume on it, big brass eagle and cross cannons on them, and they were issued. That had to last you 5 years, so they took very good care of it, and they were issued this work uniform, which they wore most of the time. Now, they were also given something that's very important, and it was put in this bag. Most soldiers, this is the most important thing. This is what you issued a ration of food. This is exactly the ration would be whatever they had. It may be fresh meat. It may be fresh vegetables. Maybe some corn, maybe beans, whatever. If it wasn't fresh, it would be rice, parched corn. They had ovens, bakeries, they made bread. But in the field, you might end up with some salted pork, some salted beef, dried beans, hardtack, hard bread, square biscuit, sea bread, travel bread. Got a lot of names. It's hard. Had to boil it in the coffee that they gave them. They boil it down and cook it in the coffee or the bacon grease. They were also issued coffee, like I said, sugar, vinegar for flavoring, salt, candles, and soap to wash with. Now, everything a soldier had, he would have to carry on it. Now, generally on a campaign like this, there would be no transportation. The soldier had to carry everything by his own shank. So when he went marching, he was given a knapsack. If it was wintertime, he would have a overcoat rolled up on top. He needed it. Also against the rain, like a raincoat. They issued a blanket, which goes inside. He was issued 2 pairs of socks twice a year, along with a uniform. 2 pair of boots twice a year. Or he wore them out. Did a lot of marching. Canteen for water. And one of our favorite things he was issued is this gorgeous, handsome forage cap. This is called a forage cap, made out of leather. It's hot, it's heavy, but foraging is where you go out and collect some taxes.
Legalize stealing.
Legalize stealing. Nope. And it folds up so that when you're on the march, you can put your dress uniform on, put your dress cap on, put this inside here, put your fatigue jacket in there, and everything you've got, you're on the march with. Take it with you. Artilleryman is supposed to be 5 feet 9 inches tall, smarter, stronger than an infantry. You could get in the artillery, it was a better place to be. Not only were you trained with the large cannon in the forts, you're also trained as infantry. Infantry musket was issued, standard infantry musket of the time. Musket is because it's a musket length. It's got a smooth bore barrel, just like a pipe. No rifling. Rifling is slower to load. It goes farther, it goes more accurately, it hits harder, but these are fast to load. And that was an important thing. You saw us lining up over there, shoulder to shoulder. Well, there's only 5 of us. A company of men is 50. And you put as many companies as you've got, you line up, linear tactics they call it, you outmaneuver your opponent, and you fire at him. Big shotgun, everybody shoots at him. Shoots down range at the enemy. So speed is what counts. Ammunition, they issue a stand of arms, includes a cartridge box with ammunition. Ammunition is rolled up in paper cartridges. It's got powder, the ball in it. Soldier had to have good opposable teeth in the front because he's got to tear that open. That one's in brown paper. It's got a smaller ball, 64, 65 caliber, down to 69 caliber barrel. Now this one, in a green paper, this would have 1 ball, and 3 buckshot. Now, if you were fighting a Britisher or a Frenchman, he's civilized, he fights fair, he does like you do. Lines up shoulder to shoulder and fires at each other. It's unsportsmanlike to shoot more than 1 projectile. But Seminoles down here in Florida, hiding behind trees, the bucking ball is the best. The more lead you can shoot at them, the better. So, musket is a flintlock. What's supposed to happen if it's a nice day and it's not wet, and the lock is dirty and everything functions correctly, when the command is given for it to fire, it will come down, spark by shaving steel off this hardened frisson, making an orange spark, igniting the primer in the pan, goes through a hole, igniting the main charge. You saw us go through the loading in 12 times. I'll explain that to you. Soldier had to do loading, the 12 steps of loading until he didn't have to think about it. Prepare to load it 12 times, load. Open pan. First thing he has to do is bring access to the lock, opens his pan, handle cartridge. It's out of cartridge, tear cartridge. Prime. It's a little bit of powder in the pan, pitches the cartridge off. Shut pan. Cast about. Brings it around where he's got access to the muzzle. Charge cartridge. Pours the powder in the ball. Generally the paper would go down there, but we don't want any flammables in the fort. And acts as a patch, holds the ball in. Draw, rammer. Ram, cartridge. Turn, rammer. Rams it down with the breech, puts the rammer back. No good if he doesn't have the rammer. Shoulder, arm. Now he's ready to fire. It really didn't take him that long to do, and I'm explaining it to you. But a soldier should at least be able to do that, load and fire by command, about twice a minute. 3 times a minute if he's really good at it. No problem. 30 seconds, loading and firing should be no problem for a trained soldier. Go this way, go this way, go this way. To the right about, face. Ready. Aim. Fire. Shoulder. Arm. Right about, face. Those creeks. Now you go, well, what is this Indian doing here with me? Well, they needed troops because the army was so small. The militias came here from Tennessee, Missouri, Delaware, Pennsylvania, all the southern states were sent down here to round up Indians. 30-day enlistment, 90 days enlistment, and they even had Indians. Now the Creeks were kind of a traditional enemy of the Seminoles down here in Florida, even though some of them had run down here to get away from the white men before. And there were factions. And they brought Creeks down here to fight the Seminoles. They brought Cherokees down to try to talk them into the surrender. But, so this turned out to be a big war. One reason it lasted so long is this was an unexplored territory. Into the second year of the war, big campaign came. This fort was built during that. The general in charge of that told Washington, said the interior of Florida is not known to me as the interior of China. No way, he knew. But their plan was to bring Commander Pierce down the coast, Zachary Taylor across, and Column came down to St. John's, landed where Sanford is today, built Fort Mellon, and started this way, trying to bring the Indians to battle. Now, linear tactics of that time, fixed bayonet. Like I told you, take your enemy, shoulder, arm. You look them in the eye, you advance on them as fast, loading as fast as you can, and then charge, bands, ah! And you stick each other. That is civilized warfare. You got to admit, whoever's left on the field is the winner, right? All right. They may not win the war, but they won the battle. Shoulder, arm, wrist. Now you think the Indians stood up for that? No. No, they did not. The Indians were North Florida. The Indian Agency was up in Fort King by Silver Spring, where Ocala is today. That's where the Indians lived. Go over the Withlacoochee. This far south was not a hospitable place. That's where their reservation was, and that's pretty much where they stayed. Well, the campaigns that came before this campaign moved them south. They would make a stand. They would prepare the battlefield. They had rifles. They had short of ammunition, short of powder, but they fought with rifles. They would cut the underbrush down. They would get a body of water between them and the soldiers who were coming in for battle. They would notch the trees for their rifles so that they could get a steady aim. Soldiers would deploy for battle. They would not stand there and get shot. They would charge. They would go across the water, taking casualties, and they would try to catch the Indians. They didn't stay around. They ran. And they could move a lot faster than the military. So that's exactly what they did for 7 long years. They chased the Seminoles. Now, where are the Seminoles now? Anybody been down to the Big Cypress Reservation? Billy Swamp Safari? No, nobody's been down there? I don't blame you. And what a place. Swampy, grassy area. Seminoles didn't want to be there. They got pushed down there. Campaigns like this. Zachary Taylor, they made a stand. Biggest battle down on Okeechobee. Zachary Taylor fought them, prepared the battlefield. He took a lot of casualties, and it happened on Christmas Day, 1838. Or 37, I'm sorry. Same day this fort was completed. Now this campaign, they were coming down. They, like I said, they filled a place called Fort Mellon. They didn't know how far the St. Johns River was navigable. Steamboats were going down. They were building this road, building forts on the way, and what they did is just pretty much open the territory for them. You go by places today named after them, drive roads that were opened up from Indian trails, or this soldiers need to get from one place to the other. Take Highway 40, plantations in Ormond, where Ormond is today. They needed to get from those plantations to Fort King. Highway 40, travel it today, that's the way they went. They needed to get to, from that same area, and they needed to get over to Fort Brooke. You go on I-4, they could probably travel faster these days, but anyway, you go to I-4, that basically, the roads got bigger, and that takes you from that plantation belt to over to Fort Brooke on Tampa Bay. Place names: Fort Catlin. That's Orlando. It changed, but you got Fort Pierce. Commander Pierce built a fort down there. Fort Lauderdale. He was from Tennessee. You heard me named Jessup. We didn't know anything about the interior of Florida. Know anything around here named Jessup? Yeah, he found him a big lake up there, named it after himself. All right, they came down and they found the lake, and they named it after Colonel Harney. And they built a Fort Lane. Now, Lane, the poor fellow, he was in command of those company of creeks. He went crazy and drove his sword through his eye socket and killed himself. He got a fort named after him. So, came down, built Fort Christmas, went farther, made a fort named Fort McNeil, went down and found a lake and named it after Secretary of War Poinsett. So all these names that were opened up were pretty important places in Florida today. 1,500 American soldiers lost their lives. Now, citizen soldiers, we have no idea. It may have been twice that. To remove 5,000 Indians out of the territory of Florida. Took 7 years. They still didn't get them all. Took a seventh of the United States budget for those 7 years. So one whole year went to remove 5,000 Indians. And very unpopular war. About 30% of the troops would desert. Had more officers resign from this campaign than until Vietnam. We never had as many until Vietnam. That's how unpopular the war was. Now you're in Fort Christmas. You came out here to see it. This is actually a museum. It's a copy of the fort. We know how big the fort was, and this fort is the exact same size. What we don't know is exactly where the fort is. It's believed to be about a mile up the road now. Don't know, we have to take and skim the ground, find where the post holes were. Everything was pegged together with wood pegs, built up on the ground, no nails, so nobody's ever really found it. But this fort, certain size, there were about 100 forts built like this in Florida during the campaign. It's a basic design. People had been fighting Indians ever since they stepped on the Atlantic off the shore. And a blockhouse like this. You or your neighbors could get together, build a blockhouse for protection, and you could just get in the blockhouse standing alone. You notice how the top is built up over the bottom? There's a reason for that. You've got a good field of fire from the second floor. Nobody can get up out, and you can fire straight down on it. Very important. If you need more room, build 2 blockhouses. Put a picket wall. Anybody tries to get up to your wall, you've got a field of fire down all 4 walls. Build loopholes. You've got enough men, you can man the wall. It makes a nice seat up there, a nice walkway, but it's actually designed, that step, so that you can fire down on the enemy. He gets up on the wall, he can't fire into it. He's not that tall. So, great design. Built a lot of them down here in Florida. Bigger, smaller, just blockhouses. That's what it's all about. It's Fort Christmas. It was built here for. It didn't house the troops. Troops mainly lived out on the road. They were passing through. This was for supplies, for ammunition. See this powder magazine? It's built, dug in the ground. Anybody know why it's dug in the ground?
Keep it cool.
Keep it cool?
No, actually, the coolness doesn't matter. It's kind of damp being dug in the ground. But if that thing explodes, they want it to explode up more than they want it to explode out. So hopefully it directs a lot of the explosion up. But powder magazines are built that way in the ground. I think I about covered it. Well, glad you came out. We're all volunteers. All this equipment belongs to us. We're going to be out here for the weekend. We got our camp set up, and if you hung around long enough so you've got some interest, we know a lot more that you might be interested in, and we invite you to come to camp and see things up close. But before we go and fall in and load in quickest time, so you can see how fast we can do it, has anybody got any questions? Yeah. There's not a sight on the side. You just need to point it that way. Big shotgun. Boom, everybody. Together. So the idea is close on the enemy. Now, since we're talking about muskets again, I'll ask you a question. What's this? That comes with the musket. It's called a brush and pick. This flintlock is very finicky. It has to be clean. It has to work just right. Dragging it through the Florida swamps in this sickly Florida godforsaken territory, they called it. That was hard to do, keep this thing functioning. But this little tool did it, helped them do it. Powder's either like mud on a day like this, or it's a nice day, it's powdery. And this brush goes ahead and cleans all that residue off. Now this pick, you haven't had a flash in the pan, But if the can goes off, this little hole is clogged, you need to clean it out. So, this pick cleans it out. The idea is, if everything goes right, you get the whole shebang.
He's got to fire one more time.
So, but you didn't know that. Nobody else
Did they
about
freak
it.
out?
It's been hanging there,
No, they were
swinging
great.
like that. So, I know you got some questions, and there's things you need to know. So, come out and visit us in camp. And hopefully the rain will hold off for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's cool, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Gotta go. Watch Allison.
Watch Allison.
Detail attention. We're going to load the quickest time. Load.
Watch the good doing.
Ready. Aim. Right blade. Fire. Alert. Run the hole. Left me. Mark.
There they go.